Hello YouTube, Dave here again. So I've recently been looking at some different ways of spicing up encounters for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. I love 5th edition, I think it's a great version of the game. Unfortunately, I do still feel that at least a couple of things may have gotten lost in the transition from 4th edition to 5th edition. And one of the major things that I like to look at here, and maybe do at least a couple of videos on, is the way that monsters were handled in 4th edition versus the way that they are handled in 5th edition. Specifically, exceptional or weaker type of monsters to throw into encounters to increase the numbers or to increase the threat that maybe a single individual might pose. So one of the things that I really liked about the 4th edition system was the inclusion of minions, elite monsters, and solo monsters. Now, I'm not entirely sure if I plan on implementing solo monsters into my 5th edition game. It's something that I have to sort of weigh the pros and cons of. But I have noticed that in 5th edition, for example, monsters do tend to be just not that tough. I don't know exactly what it is. I suspect, I mean, the armor classes always seem, too low. Hit points might seem too low, especially for higher level creatures. So I was just trying to think of ways that I might be able to alter that or to change that. And I also was just looking through some old 4th edition things, and I just really missed the idea of minions in particular, which is going to be the subject of this video. So minions, if you're not aware, are sort of fodder troops. They are meant to be, something that the players sort of mow through on their way to the tougher enemies. So they could be like minions for like a solo, maybe not a solo, but like the dungeon boss or the mid boss, or maybe just again to have more targets for the player characters to have to deal with. If you don't necessarily want to make an encounter that's going to be deadly, but you still want them to have to fight a swarm of enemies, then that's one way of going about it, is with minions. In 4th edition, we'll take a look at the 4th edition monster manual here. So in 4th edition, I'm just going to see if I can find the goblins really quick, because that's the easiest one. That's the one that I know off the top of my head is going to be in here. So we have the Goblin Cutter. And so the Goblin Cutter is a level 1 minion creature here. So this is sort of the idea that we are going to be going with, is just how minions are going to be designed in a 5th edition game. Now, I'm not actually going to be using a goblin. I'm actually going to make an orc warrior minion, but I just want to give you the basic idea here. So if you take a look as a level 1 creature, they are only worth about 1/4 the experience points of a normal, fully statted out, I guess you could say, character of the same level. So the idea is that 4 minions could take the place of 1 opponent of the same level. So that's how you would pad out, your encounters. For example, if you had a situation where you have like an orc shaman, for example, that the characters are trying to get to, well, he's got, a group of, you could have 2 regular orcs guarding him, or 8 minions, which makes for, I think, just a more epic feeling encounter. It just seems a bit more memorable to go through those waves of enemies. So if you're not familiar on how minions worked in 4th edition, it's pretty simple here. So we have a very simple stat block. So minions really never have any real special abilities or anything like that. They are meant to be super easy to run. So we have their initiative here. We just have their perception, any vision modes they might have. And then for hit point, it says that they have a single hit point. However, any attack that misses them, though, would still do damage on a miss, doesn't affect a minion. So to translate into 5th edition terms, if the minion gets hit with like a spell, for example, and the spell is saved for half, and their saving throw is higher than the DC or equal to, and they end up succeeding on the saving throw, they would take nothing instead of taking half damage. So that way, it's sort of an all or nothing type of situation, and it honestly, it works really well. It was one of the things that I kind of again, liked about them because, yeah, if you hit, with a fireball, for example, or burning hands, you could take out, the whole batch, or if their save was high enough, then they could all sort of dodge out of the way. So it's sort of a risk reward thing when it comes to that. Then they have their armor class here and then their saves. And I'll go over how to do saves here sort of shortly in terms of how I would do it for 5th edition. And then you just have their attacks and their damage, and then sort of like, so the Goblin Tactics is a standard Goblin ability that every Goblin has, and then just their stats and relevant skills. So their attack, just a standard bonus, is pretty average for the level that the characters would be at or for the challenge of the creature. So it's not anything where it's going to be exceptionally high, but it's also not going to be something where their attack bonus is so low that they're just a non-factor. And then they would do average damage for the weapon that they are using with their modifier put in place. So for example, with a +2 to strength, and the short sword of with doing a d6, 3 would be the average result there, and 2 for the strength, and that's what gives them the damage of 5. So that's just sort of how that works out. So they do just a set amount of damage, and the set amount of damage is actually really easy to do in 5th edition because the stat blocks for the monsters actually have that there by default. So like I said, we have a very, very simple stat block there. So what I want to do is we're going to go to the monster manual here, and we're going to find the orc. Okay, so here we have our regular orc. As you can see, it has 15 hit points, which actually makes it kind of tough, but we're not looking for these sort of standard orcs. We want the characters to be able to sort of wade through and cut through them in order to get to, say, an orc war chief that they're guarding, for example. So we're going to design an encounter around that sort of concept. So we have the armor class there, which is easy to work out. It's 13 for the hide armor. Their speed, their hit points is going to be 1, but once again, they don't take any damage on an attack that would do, say, save for half, or on a miss it still deals some sort of damage. They won't take any of that. Their stats will stay the same, their skills will stay the same. However, we need to determine their saving throws. Now, for saving throws, the way that's going to be done is going to be done similar to how 4th edition didn't have the traditional saves that we know from 3rd edition, or 3rd edition and say Pathfinder, for example. They had what was called a defense, and the defense was essentially 10 plus whatever the number was for the ability score. So that's what we're going to do here, is we're just going to have their saving throws be 10 plus the modifier, basically an average roll. That's what we're going to go with. So, for example, their strength saving throw would be 13, their dex saving throw would be 11, their con saving throw would be 13, intelligence saving throw would only be 8, and their wisdom and charisma saves would only be 10. So it's going to be difficult to get them on strength or con. Any of those saves that would be thrown at them, they're likely to pass, so they're not too likely to be poisoned, for example. So that's how we're going to do that. And then everything else is pretty much the same. They're just going to have their hit attack of +5. For 9 damage on a hit, we're just going to take out the dice type there, and it's going to make them really easy to run. So what I'm actually going to do is I've got my page set up here. I'm just going to fill it out, and I'll show you what the finished stat block will look like. So here we have the finalized stat block. So as you can see, we have our Orc Warrior. It's I just listed as a minion. Armor class 13 with hide armor, hit points 1. The Orc Warrior takes no damage on a successful save or missed attack. Speed 30 feet, and I do apologize for my horrible handwriting. It's the best I can do, I'm afraid. Speed 30 feet, and then I have ability modifier and then saving throws in brackets. It's just a way I think it's easier just to do that than to take up a second line with stats and then saving throws. Now that might be confusing for some, so you feel free to do that however you wish. But for me, I just think it's easiest to do the modifier and then have the saving throw in brackets. And again, the saving throw is the same thing as like a passive perception. It's 10 plus the ability score modifier. So that way you don't have to roll. It cuts down on the extra dice rolling, and it gives you just an average result. So we have strength. Their strength modifier is +3, which gives them a saving throw value of 13 for strength based checks or saving throws. Dexterity is +1 with an 11 for their saving throw value. Constitution is +3 with a 13 value. Intelligence -2 with an 8 value, and then Wisdom and Charisma both have 0 modifier, so they get a 10 saving throw. For their senses, they have Dark Vision and a Passive Perception of 10. Languages, Common and Orc. XP value, they're worth 25 experience points. It's essentially 1/4 of the standard Orc that we have, so that's sort of the baseline that we use. So 4 of these would roughly equal the experience value of one of the other orcs. Now, I know that it seems like the fact that they still do the same amount of damage might make it a bit tough as we get to that. But also keep in mind that in 5th edition, things like Magic Missile can fire out 3 bolts with a single casting. So there are ways to be able to take out multiple orc warriors at the same time. So yes, they do the same amount of damage, but I think that that's offset by the fact that area of effects or multi-target spells like Magic Missile or things like what is it? Not Firebolt, but I think Firebolt at higher levels, but Scorching Ray and stuff like that. So there are ways to sort of thin out the numbers, which is again what the point of these minions are. So I left the experience value at 25. I didn't give it a challenge rating like 1/2 or 1/8 or anything like that, because truthfully, if you're using XP budgets to build encounters, all you really care about is the actual number. So that's why I just left that there. Aggressive, so they still get that same ability because it is a standard ability that all orcs have. So as a bonus action, the orc warrior can move up to its speed towards a hostile creature it can see. And then for actions, I only gave it the Great Axe for this one, and instead of the Great Axe and Javelin, again to make these easier and just to make it a little smoother to run. I felt like just giving it the 1 attack was fine for now. Again, these are sort of meant to be like a wave of bodyguards protecting a single like war chief or shaman. So I wasn't really worried about them having the range attacks because they're probably going to be encountered in an area that's not going to be overly. They'd be more apt to use their aggressive ability to close in on an enemy than to throw stuff at them. So that's why I went with that. So we have the melee, the Great Axe melee weapon attack, +5 to hit, reach 5 feet, 1 target, and then on a hit, it does 9 slashing damage. If you wanted to reduce the damage output of the minion orcs, for example, then you could replace the Great Axe with a longsword. And then the longsword would just do an average of, it would do 7 damage, so it would be like half of the d8 for 4 damage plus their strength modifier of 3. So you could do that if you really wanted to adjust or round down the numbers. But overall, that's just sort of how I would plan on introducing minions in here. And like I said, I think they were one of my favorite parts about 4th edition. The monster manual or the monster vault, those products, the minions were always some of my favorites. And I had actually even gone so far as to incorporated minions into the last 3rd edition campaign that I ran when I was running the Age of Worms adventure path from Dungeon Magazine. I actually used minions from 4th edition in that campaign, and it worked really well there, and it was a lot of fun, and the players kind of enjoyed it. Especially like with 3rd edition, it made those extra attacks or things like power attack and cleave and great cleave just feel like they would get more use. And I just that's just sort of the feeling I wanted to capture here. And I really like the idea of the player characters wading into a group of enemies and having to deal with them. And you see it in movies all the time, you see it in TV shows or even in video games where you just have this wave of enemies that are sort of the speed bump between you and the target you're trying to get to. They just they swat them down like flies, sort of thing. So that's just the idea that I had with incorporating minions into 5th edition. And this is how I would personally go about it. So let me know in the comments below, what changes would you make to the way that I did the minions here. I would love to know that. Like, one of the things that I'd considered is like weak versus strong or average saving throw numbers, where perhaps they might have like an extra bonus on some of like for the orc, for example, like strength and probably con might get like a proficiency bonus thrown in there. But I didn't want to tamper with any of that stuff for now, because I want to see how this would work. But let me know what you guys think, and let me know what your thoughts are on the idea of minions. So I hope you enjoyed this video. The next one that I'm going to take a look at will be introducing the concept of an elite monster from the way that it was done in 4th edition into the 5th edition D&D style. So I hope you come back for that video. Thank you guys very much for watching. I will see you next time. Take care.